I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit different today and rank my top 10 crafty quirks from 10 to 1. We all have them, those little things we do or choices we make that make us unique. Here we go. Number 10. Let's start with a few of my little quirky craft room setups and habits. I love to use iridescent shimmer spray and gold metallic watercolor splatter to add some shimmer or soften any harsh ink blending, or even camouflage smudges. It's cheap and easy, although you do have to remember that it'll take some drying time. Another cheap way to add sparkle is stickles. I have used this ever since I started card making in the way back. Right now, one of my favorite things to do with them is to run them along the edge of a panel and then smear them slightly for a flatter, more organic feel. I love inlaid die cutting. That flat look just makes me happy. Plus, I feel a little bit clever when it all comes together. I like to stand when I'm crafting. This is a pretty recent change. Standing while crafting and recording video cuts down on my sitting time, and it's just so freeing. I'm even less resentful about the fact that some of the supplies I want are just out of reach, and now I just walk over to get them. My wall of dies. I added this die board to my craft room a couple of years ago. Like many craft room improvements, it was the result of a couple of frustrating situations. First, I never really found a great way to store my nesting die shapes, the ones I use all the time to cut panels for my cards. Second, I found myself using the same word dies over and over, and this meant searching through my drawers of stamps and dies to pull out the same thing every time I needed them. In my regular card making, I don't usually use colored cardstock. I make my own with my ink pads. This means I only need to keep white cardstock on hand, and I don't have to try and keep track of any colored cardstock scraps. It does mean that I definitely need ink refills. I do have black in craft, and I keep a few basic Christmassy colors for card bases for my church Christmas card project. I don't really use patterned paper because I love making my own with all the techniques I've learned over the years. This is why you've never seen a video from me that tells you how to use up all your patterned paper. I do have a couple of videos for using up backgrounds. That's almost the same. Number 9. Have you ever done this? I get a certain feeling when I see something new that I just know will be an old favorite, and I'll do whatever I have to get it. Recently, I bought this stamp and die set because of this one angel. Yes, there are other angels in the set, and there are pretty stained glass windows, stars, and sentiments. But what was really special to me was this one angel. I've already used her along with the stars and one of the sentiments to make 30 cards. And who knows, in the future, I may use some of the others as well. But I'm happy with my decision, even if I don't. Fortunately, this feeling doesn't come along too often. That's another reason why I felt justified in getting something I know I would really love. Number 8. I love to spin, and I'm a sucker for any of these spinning tools that come out. I think it's because I love circles so much, and we'll come back to that a little bit later down the list. I have the Stencils 360 tool, which allows you to spin stencils like I'm doing here. I have a playlist showing beginner to advanced techniques that you can do with this tool and the round stencils that are created to work with it. And yes, there are ways to use the stencils you already have with it as well. I also have the Altenew stamp wheel, the original one, not the newer, larger one. And I made a video comparing this tool to the Stencils 360 tool, but basically one's for stencils and one's for stamps. I also have the Sizzix Stamp and Spin tool, which works differently than the stamp wheel to give you similar results, if you know what I mean. I did a video comparing the Stamp and Spin to the stamp wheel, and I'll link that here, but the short story is that you don't need both tools. I also have the Stencil Builder tool from Gina K, and it works really well for spinning the Stencil Builder stencils, a bit like the Stencils 360 tool. And it's a great option if you want to save some money and you don't mind that it gives you a little less freedom in how you spin your stencils. Again, here's a video comparing the two if you're interested. Number 7. I like to create leftovers on purpose. What I mean by that is whenever I'm die cutting, I like to also cut a sentiment that I can put away in this container for future use. Having a bunch of these on hand makes finishing my cards go so much more quickly. I started this because I make the same types of cards over and over again. Birthday, thank you, Christmas, and thinking of you. And within those 4 categories, I have some favorite stamps and dies that I reach for over and over again. So again, making them up in advance is a great time saver. There are also stamps and dies created specifically for this purpose. I think Tailored Expressions was the first to create this ingenious way of stamping multiple sentiments and then die cutting them all at once. And it doesn't just have to be sentiments. I have friends who stamp, cut, and color their critters and their flowers and other images as well as words. And I like to keep lots of little dots on hand, cut from specialty cardstock to act as inexpensive homemade embellishments. Number 6. I love clean and simple cards made with messy techniques. Back when I started, my favorite kind of card was so clean and simple, it was minimal. When I started my YouTube channel, I started experimenting with more and more techniques and getting messier and messier. I'm still not one who puts a ton of layers and elements on every card, even if the elements that are on my cards are busy and technique heavy. And still, when I'm scrolling, it's very often the cards with a ton of white space that really catch my eye. Number 5. If you're looking for tips for making multiples, I'm your girl. Whether it's Christmas cards like I do for my church every year, or invitations, or just wanting to get that efficiency of making more than one while you have your supplies out, I've got a playlist filled with tips. I've done multiples with all kinds of techniques over the years, and trust me, when you're doing something 30 times, you very quickly figure out how to make the process go as smoothly as possible. Number 4. I love using my Crafty stash. I've been making cards for a long time now, almost 20 years. And over that time, I've collected a lot of stuff. A lot. I've destashed a lot as well, and right now I'm happy with the level of inventory I'm carrying, and I'm loving using what I have already. That's not to say that I don't buy anything new. I definitely do, as I mentioned earlier. But I'm able to really think about what I already have before making a new purchase and whether I've got that special feeling about the new product. I love the freedom of mixing up my old and new supplies as well as mixing companies. I know it can be frustrating if I'm using something that you love and it's no longer available, but that's where quirk number 2 is going to come in, so stick around. Number 3. I don't really do work for companies much anymore. When I started out all those years ago, I worked with some really great brands and really great people, and I showed off their product and they showed off my work. Some of them paid as well, and it was great. As time passed, I started to realize that I really just want to work with products I really love, and in many cases that I already have in my stash, rather than showing off new releases all the time. As I just said, I love the challenge and freedom of mixing and matching old and new products and mixing between companies and really getting the most from my Crafty stash. I've got no pressure to meet deadlines, and I can post when I'm feeling inspired. I had a horrible experience last year with a company who decided that they saw no value in all the hours and hours of work I had done for them, and they decided not to pay me. I lost money and I lost a friend, and I was so surprised and very sad. So I'm definitely not in a rush to risk a repeat of that experience. So be careful. Having said all of that, there are lots of really good companies out there, and design team experience is definitely a great way to build your crafty business if that's what you're looking to do. Number 2 has to be how I use LIMES in my card making. If you've been here before, you know that LIMES is an acronym I use to help me when I'm inspired by a card but I don't want to copy it or I don't have the same supplies. It stands for list, include, modify, exclude, and spin, and it's just an easy little checklist for analyzing the inspiration by listing the colors, techniques, and elements and thinking about what direction you want to go in. Many of us do this intuitively, and that's great, but for some, having this little trick makes it more of a thought process. If you think it's helpful, I've got a full playlist here that you can watch to see how it works in real life. And my number 1 quirk has to be, did you guess it already? Yes, my favorite 4¼ inch square card. Many people have asked me about it over the years, so here's my thinking. I love the symmetry and modern look of a square, and I love circles, and a circle fits really well on a square card. This small square card is really just a cutoff of an A2 card, and therefore it fits in an A2 envelope. So if you live somewhere where square envelopes require extra postage, that's a way to get around that. This size can still be used for a lot of fun folds, and it is pretty versatile. And I don't mind that it makes me a little bit different from other card makers either. Are there any downsides to it? I don't think I've really talked about this before, but there are definitely a couple of, well, let's call them challenges. First, the space on the card is pretty small. Most of the products around right now are designed for A2 cards or bigger. So every once in a while, I'll find that the scale of a pattern or focal image just doesn't work. And that's why you'll see me make an A2 card from time to time. Also, and this is kind of related, if you're looking for square frame dies or similar, there's definitely fewer of those around. Finally, going back to the envelope, some people don't like that there's extra space in an A2 envelope and that the card might move around, and that's fair. It doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, then this size is not your thing. So I don't know if you noticed, but I did make a card as we went along today, although a few of the steps were out of order. It's a 4¼ inch square Z fold with lots of my favorite quirks included on it. Supplies are listed below. So some of our quirks are habits that we found that really help us in our crafting. Some of our quirks are about our own personal style and preferences, and some, well, they're just quirky. What's your biggest crafty quirk? I'd love to hear about it, so let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.